So Trump's second term, it all kicks off tomorrow.
Yeah.
With a re-election certification becoming official. And I think, a lot of our listeners are probably feeling a little anxious right now.
Right.
Especially, some folks with brown skin are probably thinking
Uh-huh.
about, keeping their passports and birth certificates close at hand
Yeah, I can see that.
in case immigration comes knocking. You know how it is.
Absolutely.
And that's really what we want to dive into today.
Okay.
We've got a whole stack of articles here from the Washington Post, the New Yorker, the Atlantic, and the New York Times.
Oh, wow. So quite the range.
Yeah, and, they're all kind of looking at this question of what can we expect from Trump 2.0?
Right.
What's this second term going to look like? And
I think it's a question on everyone's minds.
yeah, and, from what I've been reading, it's not looking too rosy.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So, one thing that really struck me is how much the world has changed
Uh-huh.
since Trump was last in office.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like he went off to play golf for 4 years, and in the meantime,
Yeah.
the whole global landscape shifted.
Yeah, the articles I've read talk about this.
Yeah.
New, axis of resistance that's popped up.
Oh, yeah. What is that all about?
It basically means you've got countries like Russia,
Oh,
China, Iran, North Korea.
Daddy.
They're kind of banding together
Interesting.
to challenge the U.S.,
So it's not just Trump versus the world anymore.
Right. Exactly. It's more complicated than that now.
Wow. And I remember, during his first term,
Yeah.
Trump was always talking about how he was this great deal maker.
Yeah, the art of the deal.
Right. But it seems like that approach might not work so well in this new world order.
It's hard to say, but yeah, I think it'll definitely be more difficult.
Yeah.
These other leaders, they're playing a different game now.
Right. They're not just going to roll over for Trump.
Exactly. They have their own interests now.
It's like we're entering a whole new era.
It does feel that way, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but I'm not exactly feeling optimistic about it.
Yeah. I can understand that there's a lot to be concerned about.
Like, for example, this whole thing about mass deportations.
Oh, right.
The New Yorker article had this really chilling section
Okay.
where they were talking about the Chinese Exclusion Act,
Interesting.
from back in the late 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
And they were basically suggesting that one would see something similar happening now.
Wow.
Like mass deportations, potentially even challenges to birthright citizenship.
Wow. That's
I know, right?
a pretty intense comparison.
Yeah, it really freaked me out when I read that.
I can imagine.
And then I was reading the Washington Post article,
Yeah.
and they were talking about how Trump is proposing the biggest deportation operation in American history, targeting over 11 million people.
11 million?
11 million, that's like the population of some countries.
That's a staggering number.
Yeah, and before you ask,
Yeah.
yes, most of those people are Mexicans.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Yeah, so, we're talking about a massive human impact here.
Absolutely.
And then the article goes on to talk about the economic side of things.
Okay.
Like, they highlight this town in Mexico called Francisco Villa.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently the whole town is basically funded by remittances.
Oh, wow.
Money that people working in the U.S. send back to their families.
Right.
So they've got paved streets, a new high school.
All from those remittances.
All from remittances.
Huh.
Yeah, and the article makes this point that, in the U.S., we tend to view undocumented immigrants as criminals.
Yeah. We hear that a lot.
But in Mexico,
Uh-huh.
these people are seen as heroes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because they're sacrificing so much to support their families and communities.
Right.
So it's really two completely different perspectives.
It's a huge cultural divide.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes this whole deportation issue so complex.
For sure, there's so many layers to it.
Yeah, it's not just about politics, it's about people's lives.
Absolutely.
Their families, their futures.
And then there's the fact that Trump's team has said they won't exempt parents who are living in the U.S. illegally.
Right.
Even if they have U.S.-born children.
So even having a child who's an American citizen might not be enough to protect a family from being torn apart.
Doesn't sound like it.
That's a scary thought.
It is a very hardline stance.
Okay, so we've got this, volatile global landscape.
Right.
And this massive deportation plan hanging over us.
Yeah, it's a lot.
What about domestic politics?
Okay.
Can Trump actually get all of this done?
Well, that's where things get interesting.
Okay, tell me more.
The Atlantic article goes into detail about the legislative challenges Trump might face.
Okay, so it's not going to be easy for him.
Not necessarily. Remember, the Republicans only have a slim majority in the House.
Oh, yeah. And that whole thing with electing the speaker.
Exactly. It was a real nail-biter getting Mike Johnson in there.
It was like a preview of the battles to come.
Exactly, and then you've got these conservative holdouts
Oh, right.
within the Republican Party who are more focused on spending cuts.
So they might not be on board with Trump's agenda.
Right, they have their own priorities.
So even with a Republican majority,
yeah,
Trump might not be able to just push through whatever he wants.
it's not a guarantee he might actually need some bipartisan support.
Which means the Democrats could have some leverage.
Potentially, yes.
Wow. This is getting complicated.
It is. It's a very dynamic situation.
It's like a political thriller.
Right.
Okay, so we've got global tensions, mass deportations, and a divided government.
Mm-hmm.
What else is new?
Well, there's one more thing we need to talk about.
Okay, Kimmy.
The elephant in the room, January 6th.
Ugh. Yeah, that.
And the way its narrative has been completely distorted.
It's scary how effective Trump and his allies have been at rewriting history.
It is really something.
And the New York Times piece goes deep on this.
Oh, yeah, I read that one.
It's terrifying how they've shifted the narrative from, bipartisan condemnation to, downplaying the violence, calling the rioters political prisoners.
And pushing that whole persecution narrative.
Right, which resonates so strongly with Trump's base.
It's a textbook case of misinformation and propaganda.
And it's working.
Unfortunately, yes. It's tapping into those existing fears and resentments.
Like there's this quote from a congressman comparing the riot to a normal tourist visit.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one.
And then there's this whole theory going around that it was a false flag operation.
It's incredible how they've managed to twist things.
And then there's this whole J6 prison choir thing.
Oh, gosh, yes.
They're singing Justice for All, with Trump reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
It's like they're trying to normalize what happened on January 6th.
Turn it into some kind of patriotic act.
It's a chilling example of how truth can be manipulated.
Especially in a climate of fear and uncertainty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous combination.
So yeah, we've got a lot to worry about.
It seems that way.
But I guess that's why we do these deep dives.
Knowledge is power.
Exactly. So let's keep digging in.
Sounds good to me. And, this whole distortion of history thing, it has some very real-world consequences.
Yeah, especially when it comes to justice and accountability.
Right, like those 2 indictments against Trump.
Oh, yeah, the one in Georgia for election interference, and then the federal one for trying to overturn the 2020 election.
Exactly, and we can't forget about special counsel Jack Smith.
Right. He was the one leading the federal investigation.
Yeah, and Trump has been making all sorts of threats against him.
Oh, yeah. He's been going after anyone who's held him accountable.
Like Liz Cheney, for example.
Yeah. It makes you wonder what he'll do now that he's back in power.
It's a scary thought, for sure.
Like, what does this mean for the rule of law?
It's a big question.
Are we heading towards a system where those in power are above the law?
Well, the federal case against Trump was actually dropped recently.
Oh, wow. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, so he's off the hook for that one.
But the Georgia case is still ongoing, right?
That's right.
So it's not over yet.
Not by a long shot. And, this whole thing sets a dangerous precedent.
Yeah, like if a president can incite an insurrection and get away with it.
It's a slippery slope.
What's to stop future leaders from doing the same thing?
Exactly. It undermines the whole system.
And then there's the fact that Trump has talked about pardoning those involved in the January 6th attack.
Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms.
It's like he's rewarding those who tried to overturn the election.
It's a complete inversion of justice.
And with all this misinformation flying around, it's hard to know what to believe anymore.
It's more important than ever to be critical thinkers.
Yeah, to question the narratives that are being presented to us.
And to seek out diverse perspectives.
That's what I love about these deep dives.
Me too.
It's about equipping ourselves with the knowledge we need to navigate this crazy world.
It's not about predicting doom and gloom.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the challenges.
So we can be prepared.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Oh.
The shifting global landscape, the threat of mass deportations, the turbulent domestic political scene, the distortion of history.
And the challenges to justice and accountability.
It's a lot to process.
It is.
I'm sure some of our listeners are feeling overwhelmed right now.
That's understandable.
But it's important to remember that knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
The more we understand the challenges, the better equipped we are to face them.
And to take action.
Right, this isn't about giving in to fear or despair.
It's about empowerment.
It's about thinking critically and engaging in meaningful action.
So what do you think really stands out from all this?
Well, for me, it's just the sheer scale of it all.
Yeah.
It feels like we're at a tipping point.
In a lot of ways we are.
And the choices we make now could have huge consequences down the line.
That's why we need to be informed and engaged.
So what can people actually do?
Well, for starters, we can't just be passive consumers of information.
Right. We need to be critical.
We need to seek out reputable journalism.
That presents diverse perspectives.
And is committed to fact-checking.
Yeah. And then there's the question of how we support those who are most vulnerable.
Right. Especially with the threat of mass deportations.
Exactly. There are so many organizations out there
Doing amazing work.
fighting for the rights of immigrants, advocating for civil liberties.
Providing legal defense funds.
We need to support those groups.
With our time, our money, our expertise.
And we can't forget the power of our own voices.
Right, we need to speak out against injustice.
We write to our elected officials.
Engage in constructive dialogue.
Even with those who hold different views.
It's about building bridges, not walls.
And of course, voting is crucial.
Absolutely.
Be sure you're registered.
And informed about the candidates and the issues.
Every election is a chance to shape the direction of our country.
It's about reclaiming our power as citizens.
And participating in the democratic process.
We're not helpless.
There are millions of people who share our concerns.
Who are working towards a better future.
It's easy to get caught up in the negativity.
But there's also a lot of hope out there.
And resilience.
Exactly.
That's what will guide us through these tough times.
I believe that.
So as Trump's second term begins,
Yeah.
it feels like we're at a real crossroads.
We are. It's a pivotal moment.
The choices we make now could have big consequences.
Absolutely. They can reverberate for years to come.
So, with all these challenges, what can people actually do?
Well, I think the first thing is we
Yeah.
can't just be passive.
Right.
We can't just sit back and consume information without thinking critically about it.
So we need to be more active in how we engage with the news and everything.
Exactly. We need
Yeah.
to be discerning,
Okay.
question the sources, be skeptical of anything that seems too good to be true or too bad to be true.
Right. Because there's so much misinformation out there.
It's everywhere, and it's designed to manipulate us.
So how do we protect ourselves from that?
Well, one way is to seek out reputable journalism. Look for sources that have a track record of accuracy, that are committed to fact-checking.
Yeah. And that present diverse perspectives.
That's crucial. We need to hear from different voices, different viewpoints.
And then there's the whole issue of how we support those who are most vulnerable.
Absolutely, like with these potential mass deportations.
Yeah, there can be a lot of people who need our help.
There are, and thankfully there are a lot of organizations out there doing amazing work.
Oh, yeah, like what kind of organizations?
Well, there are groups that are fighting for the rights of immigrants,
Okay.
advocating for civil liberties, providing legal defense funds.
So these are like, nonprofits and advocacy groups and stuff.
Exactly. And they rely heavily on public support.
So we can donate to them, volunteer our time.
Exactly. Every little bit helps.
And we can't forget the power of our own voices.
Right. We need to speak up.
We need to speak out against injustice.
Right to our elected officials.
Engage in dialogue.
Even with people who disagree with us.
It's about building bridges, not walls.
That's so important.
And of course, voting is crucial.
Absolutely crucial. Make sure you're registered.
And informed about the candidates and the issues.
Every election is a chance to make our voices heard.
It's about reclaiming our power as citizens.
And participating in the democratic process.
It's easy to feel helpless in times like these.
I know what you mean.
But we're not alone.
No, we're not. There are millions of people who share our concerns.
And who are working towards a better future.
That's what we need to focus on.
The hope.
The resilience.
The possibility of change.
Exactly. We can't let the negativity win.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I just want to leave our listeners with a sense of,
Yeah.
hope, but also a call to action.
I think that's the perfect balance.
We can't just sit back and wait for things to get better.
We need to be active participants in shaping the future we want.
So to our listeners out there, stay informed, stay engaged.
And stay hopeful.
We're in this together.
We are, and we'll get through this.